The coffee is supplied by Tim Holder, and I'm going to introduce him in just a second. The unhealthy donuts is extremely me. I did that. You could just tell the difference here. Jim did not buy the Krispy Kremes, but we also have some bananas back there as well. Elizabeth is going to be running our Zoom show, but I want to introduce our host today, Tim Holder, who has been on my board at the Chamber of Commerce and actually was on the steering committee when we talked about the formation of an EDC back when it was at the Chamber's Economic Development Steering Committee. And we approached the three towns about putting together an EDC and an effort. And Tim was on that initial committee and Chamber Board of Directors, and then later chaired the EDC twice.
Yeah, I think they stuck me there for like 7 years. But yeah, twice.
Tim Holder.
Thanks, Bill. Pleasure. Thank you all for being here. Great to see you. For those I don't know, I'm Tim Holder. I spent probably 20 years of my career at Energy United here, local cooperatives, and then about 5 years ago, got the opportunity to kind of change gears and teamed up with our CEO here today, which is Wayne Marshall, to kind of go into the solar world versus being in the utility world. So I flip. I tell everybody I spent 20 years of my career trying to work solar, and then here I am on the other side of it. So, you know, it's fun. But thank you all for being here. Our company is based here in Huntersville. We're right now working with Brian to look for some new space. We've got a little over 39 employees, I think, as of last count. We're slated for about 51 by year end based on budget. So we need a bigger spot. This is a nice spot, but we need a little more room, and Ryan's been gracious enough to kind of help us find that. Our business is, we're majority owned by a company called F Global out of Germany. They're a renewable investment fund and EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction across the world. We've got projects under construction in Japan, Europe, and America, and we just kicked off a project in Canada, believe it or not, which is kind of strange for me to think about. But anyway, we develop, build, and operate for the life of the projects, solar projects across the U.S., Canada, and Europe. And the backside of that is these projects are typically not the smaller little projects that you've probably seen around. These are fairly large scale utility projects covering 600, 700, 800 acres of property at a time. So fairly large. But we house all of the North American operations and maintenance out of this facility, as well as all of our engineering, construction out of the same facility. Pleasure to see all you guys. Hope you have a great day. Enjoy the coffee and those Krispy Kreme donuts. I unfortunately have to jump on a call with Germany at 9:30, so I can't sit in, but hope you guys have a great day. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Tim.
Yes, absolutely.
Again, this is going to be recorded, and we're going to, at the Chamber of Commerce, we're going to send it out to our CEOs that couldn't be here, and I'm sure Ryan's going to do the same thing. At the conclusion of this program, Ryan, if you can kind of give an update on the activities, projects you can speak about, maybe some of the activities that you and Elizabeth are undertaking. But so that Deanna knows who she's speaking about. Dale, let's go around the room, and you can say who you are and what business you're with.
Yeah, Dale Gilmore. I have a financial consulting business called Quest that serves business owners on their quest, unintended, and certainly serve a lot of financial projects for lower middle market business owners. Also, I chair business growth for Bill's chamber, and certainly know Ryan. He's done a great job for our community. Appreciate you for everything you've done for us.
Ryan McDaniels with Lake Norman Economic Development.
I'm Nancy Perry with NFP. I work with a lot of companies in the area for employee benefits.
Wanda Thompson, strategist for the Lake Norman market with Atrium Health, sitting in for Manager Director.
April Patterson, Home Trust Bank. I'm a business banker.
David Keith, Artisan Signs and Graphics at Cornelius, and also the board chair this year for the Chamber of Commerce, Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce.
Brandy Montero. Can't even say my own name. How bad is that? It's still early. Not enough coffee. Brandy Montembo, payroll plus HCM, obviously payroll, but we have a full human resources software that we sell, and I'm also an ambassador for the Chamber.
JP with Daily 7 Hotels. So we have 42 properties regionally, and we have the Hampton Inn Cornelius and the Hampton Inn at Suites Huntersville.
And Mayor Melinda Bales from the town of Huntersville, and I serve on the EDC board.
Angela Sweat with Macintosh Law Firm. I too have also been a board member for the chamber for, what was it, 7 years?
And Mike Riley, Novi Health Huntersville Medical Center. I was on the board for 6 years until Bill came.
That's so true.
Katrina King, Novi Health, EDC board.
And I want to thank you all for joining. And Anthony Roberts, we have Anthony on Zoom. Welcome, Anthony.
Hey, how you doing? I'm afraid to get out in the rain.
Absolutely.
This is Melissa Nicotera. She is our HR director. Manager.
Whatever.
But she heads up our US hiring as well as deals with a lot of European hiring and everything across the board. Yeah. She's got a few minutes. I thought it'd be great if she sat in.
Oh, absolutely.
If you don't mind.
Well, no, sure. Absolutely.
Good morning, Anthony.
He's driving along. No, he's probably trying to be.
Good morning.
Sorry, thank you.
When Ryan and I were talking about the topics that we could discuss, whether it's transportation or legislative affairs, the one thing that we keep hearing from employers, whether they're larger CEOs or whether they're small businesses, is hiring employees. And I know JP with the hospitality industry, the one thing that we have struggled in the hospitality industry, particularly hotels and restaurants, is getting folks back, working. And so that is a challenge. We have Deanna Baumgardner, who is here, Employers Advantage. We worked very closely with her. I was on the board of Habitat for Humanity when we were trying to find the right CEO about 10 years ago. And we were going through all of these resumes. And of course, Chris Ahern came up, formerly of Lowe's. And it was kind of like, I'm a big South Carolina fan. Imagine you're trying to find a high school coach and you come up and you see Steve Spurrier's name. You're like, that can't be the right Steve Spurrier. And I saw Chris Ahern's name, and it was phenomenal. But Deanna worked with us as we found that CEO to lead Habitat, and Chris did an outstanding job.
Thank you.
So she knows her business, she knows the product, she knows the employment in the area. Deanna, if you'll join us.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. As Bill said, my name is Deanna Baumgardner, and my company is Employers Advantage. We provide outsourced HR to small companies, some mid-sized companies, primarily in the Lake and Charlotte area, but essentially now we're across the country because a lot of our clients are now across the country in remote workforces. So I was telling a couple of people before, I got so accustomed over the last 2 years having my notes up like on Zoom. So I might have to refer to those so that I stay on course because I will digress. So the topics that we're going to go through.
Do you have a slide deck?
Yeah, it's on, it should be on there. The PowerPoint should be, yeah. Because the topics we're going to go through, I'm going to go through a little bit in high level so that we can create some discussion, but each one of these, like I could go on forever. So I want to stay focused on what we're looking at today. So specifically, we're going to focus on, you can go to the next one. We're going to focus on managing the work environment, essentially post-pandemic. I know we're not out of it, but what's happening is the work environment is being pushed along and employers are in this spot with what do we do? How do we maintain and how do we go forward? We're going to look at the Remote, Hybrid, and Onsite Balancing Act. And then lastly, we're going to talk about attracting and retaining employees. But you'll see that as we go through all of these, there's a common theme and everything kind of ties together. So essentially, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about in managing the post-pandemic work environment is very similar to what we're going to see in attracting and retaining employees. So one of the things that I think happened throughout 2020 was it exposed a lot of cracks in the workplace system. So the pandemic itself, if you weren't ahead of the curve already, it immediately put you behind the curve and forced people to change into remote work. Some of the cracks that were exposed, again, was lack of flexibility, maybe some racial and gender inequities, wage gaps, those kinds of things are what came out. And initially, we were all like, let's just hang out for a couple weeks, we'll go back. And so then for a while, we just kept thinking, we can't wait to go back. We can't wait to go back. But I'm here to tell you, there is no going back. Like it's never gonna be that way again. And that's okay. So what we have to do now is just understand what that looks like for our organizations so that we can move forward. When anything happens, significant, like what we've gone through over the last couple of years, it'll never be the same. So we're gonna take a look at what that looks like for organizations so that we can manage this appropriately. So again, I think it's okay for people not to hope for the past because we will just get disappointed every time. And sometimes I equate it to especially the whole return to the office part. We were working with flip phones and then we got exposed to smartphones and now we're being told to go back to flip phones. Like it just doesn't work that way, right? So I think right now for organizations, if you haven't already, it is time to do a gut check on your policies and your procedures, your benefits offerings, and your technology needs. And why I say that is because obviously organizations don't do business the way that they used to before. And so therefore employees don't work the way they used to. On top of that, employees' needs have changed. They have different needs as we've gone through these last couple of years. Not only have their needs changed, but their priorities have changed. Has anybody heard of people who have, left industries because that's not what they decided they wanted to do anymore? Or maybe they left jobs altogether and left their careers for whatever reason, maybe family obligations, caregiving obligations, there's all kinds of things that are happening. So we really need to deep dive into these policies and practices. One in particular that came throughout the pandemic was paid time off. The government forced paid time for smaller companies because we have a workforce that wasn't able to take sick time off because they couldn't afford to lose the pay, right? And so for quarantine times, companies were required to provide that as paid leave. North Carolina doesn't have paid sick leave requirement, but there are a lot of other states that do, and more states are adding that. So that's something to be prepared for, is reevaluating your paid time off policies to make sure that they fit what your workforce is currently needing right now. The other piece is revisiting your benefit offerings. And I'm going to put Nancy with NFP on the spot here because she's going to be a wealth of information about this. But what we're seeing is, including the traditional benefits that come from group employee benefits, people are looking for non-traditional benefits. In my company, one of the things we offer is something called Fringe. It's a company out of Virginia and it's pretty cool, but basically I give each employee a bucket of points and they can choose to use those points however they want. They can get Netflix memberships, they can get Instacart memberships, they can get care.com memberships, they can get passes to Disney, they can get, whatever it is that they want. There's a whole marketplace for them to choose what works for them. And so I was hoping Nancy with NFP would give us some insight if she has any benefit trends that she's seeing with her clients.
Yeah. So it's really all about personalization. What the pandemic has forced things to happen is individualization. There was a time where it was, what's your deductible, what's your copay, what is my payroll deduction, right? And that's what people thought about. And they thought, oh, well, if I make your deductible better, then people are going to want to come. If I add a little bit more to their 401k, people will be happy about that. But it's not about that anymore. It's about personalization. I have seen benefits from offering on-site childcare to pet insurance to legal services. Well-being is a really, really hot button because not only COVID, the election, what's happening in Ukraine, mental well-being is really, really important. And a lot of companies offer EAP programs, but do you really know how to get to that program? Do you really know? Because most of the time employers, here's my open enrollment, here's my meetings, and then when someone needs something, where do they go to get it? So technology has become extremely important because you've got folks that, you had a company where everyone was in the office and then they went remote and then someone decided, I don't like Lake Norman, I want to move to California, and they're able to work remotely in California. So it's about knowing your folks and then knowing what's important to them. And it's not just about moving the needle with offering a couple more dollars on their benefit offerings.
but doing the personalization, and there's all kinds of platforms that are out there where employers can offer these resources, but people are not required to take them.
Thank you. It was almost like you read what I had on my, like, that's exactly what we're seeing is it is based off of individual needs. The pandemic humanized a lot of things. So, I mean, there's a lot of good things that came out of a very horrible situation, and that's what we need to focus on. And I'm glad you brought up the mental health benefits, because that is another good thing that came out of all of this is people are talking about it more, and employers are providing that benefit. The EAPs are great. They're foundational to a mental wellness program. But like Nancy said, people need to know that that's accessible to them. They need to know where to get it. And honestly, they need to know it's okay for them to do that. They're not going to speak up and say, hey, I'm struggling mentally. Where is the EAP information? It's up to the employers to be intentional about constantly providing that information so that people can go do that on their own, right? There's still a lot of stigma around mental health. So typically people aren't going to raise their hand and say that. But I want to make sure that people know it's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to talk about mental health in the workplace, which I know historically has been taboo because you don't want to know too much about people because then you could, get in trouble. But we need to start talking about it more and offering benefits that support that. Yeah.
From an employee standpoint, I mean, I feel like I've gone through so many changes during COVID.
Yeah.
That I didn't even know EAP existed until last week.
Oh, really?
Somebody, yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody brought it up to me, and I would love to have that benefit just to kind of process everything that's going on professionally. But I don't know where to ask. I looked in the handbook. I don't know if it's even.
You can ask your HR person. Some benefit plans have an EAP in it, and a lot of people don't even know that that's in there.
Yeah.
And then there are also separate, this is not a sales pitch, but we actually do have an EAP that we provide to our clients, and we, as a product that we sell, and it does provide up to 8 free counseling sessions per employee they call them incident. So yeah, I mean,
people don't know about it.
They don't know about it.
And a lot of the life and disability carriers, so if your company does offer life insurance or disability that's an employer paid benefit, that's part of the core plan where it doesn't even cost anything. It's just a matter of, do you know that it's there and how are you communicating it to your employees that there, which puts a burden on you, right?
Yeah.
But it's just learning what's available, and there's things that's already included in what you have. You just don't know.
Yeah, you hear about it at time of hire or open enrollment, and then I will fall on the HR sword. As HR people are like, oh, they know, they've been given all the information, they should know where to go, and that's not the case, So I would go to the HR person you're talking about and ask for
But
it.
like you said, I mean, it makes employees feel like you don't want them to think that there's something majorly wrong, but you just want to process those things, and just professionally, it's been a very big challenge for all different sides of the positions that we have within our company. So.
Yeah,
and it's not just employees, it's their children.
Oh
yeah, COVID and being at home. They have access to that. They should have access to that benefit as well. But it's also
it's for all family members. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. The other thing we want to assess is our technology needs. One of the things that we're seeing is that organizations, it would be beneficial to focus on automating your managerial and your administrative tasks. Get that stuff out of the way. Get that, I think, Brandy, at Payroll Plus, don't you all use iSolve?
We do use iSolve.
Yeah, so iSolve is a wonderful HR tool that has recruiting, payroll, it's all encompassing. So from an HR perspective, if you can automate that stuff, get it out of the way for managers and employees, so then the managers can then take a more human employee focused approach. Same thing with benefits, like Nancy was saying, there's tons of benefit platforms out there that automate, and they even, feed into iSolve. There's so many things that you can do with your technology to eliminate some of the process stuff. So again, there is more of a human focused work environment, and that your policies and your practices align. There's sometimes a difference between policy and practice. We need to make sure those align, but that those technology needs feed into that. Of course, the other part is, remote working, hybrid, which we're going to get into, and what are the technology needs there, because they're not the same as working on site, right? Did anybody happen to capture the 60 Minutes thing? It was a couple months ago when they were down in Greenville, South Carolina, and they did a whole series on workplace, Great Resignation, and they highlighted a couple small businesses and some employees they followed down there to see what's going on. And the biggest thing that came out of it was flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Like it just was this reoccurring theme. There was one lady that they had on the story who, I can't remember what industry or role she was in, but she was, you know, in a managerial, somewhat executive role. And she left that to go work for a marketing company because she could do it on a flexible schedule. She could do it remotely, whereas her other employer was requiring her to come on site. And so she left an industry that she knew in a position that she was comfortable with to go find flexibility so that she could have more of that balance with her kids and her family. So it's pretty interesting. I probably, you know, Google it or something, but it was a pretty good episode. And they talked, there was a small construction company too down in Greenville that I think they followed. But that really was the underlying theme, is that organizations, it's okay to embrace the flexibility. We don't have to do the 8 to 5 anymore. I do understand that some industries, some positions, that's a standard and it is what it is. But if you think about some things that might not necessarily need to be in that standard, you can create some flexibility. Like within my organization, people do a lot of stuff after their kids go to bed. Like I don't care when the work gets done, as long as it gets done. So we really focus on outcomes more so than time. You know, they're available during the day for clients and meetings that are scheduled. But after that, you know, they do a lot of stuff at night and then they use their days with their families or whatever the case may be. So, you know, you can look at alternative work schedules. You can look at taking people from maybe instead of 8 to 5, 10 to 7, you know, that might work better for, you know, childcare, whatever the case may be. I think it's okay to look at different options, whether based on position or what have you. The other thing we're looking at is, you know, reskilling current workers. We know it's hard to find people, especially in certain industries. And so maybe there's opportunities to look internally at some of the folks that you have and train them in some of the harder to fill roles. Reskill those employees to, whether it's backups to fill-ins when there's a tight spot to fit, or for them to have another track for their career internally within the organization. So that's certainly another option. And then lastly, we really need to start looking at transparency in communication. And that doesn't mean like, you know, open up your financials and share the world to the workforce, but people need to know why decisions are being made. I'm sure you all have heard stories from whether friends, families, or maybe within your own organizations, you know, the employees are being called back to the workforce that have been successfully remote for 2 years. And the employees are like, why are we doing this? And companies are like, because we work better together. And they're like, but we have been just fine, you know. And so the why really needs to be there and it needs to be intentional. The other thing that's really important, I think, is acknowledgement. We've gone through so much in the last 2 years, and even currently with the Russia and Ukraine, I think companies cannot stick their head in the sand and expect that that stuff externally isn't impacting employees in the stuff that they do every day. And so creating acknowledgement around what's happening in the world with people and have opportunities for open conversations. We've done that with some clients where, you know, when certain things have happened, we've come in and mediated conversations without repercussions. Like people can just share their feelings, but they need to know it's in a safe place. And even if you don't provide that, I think it's still important to acknowledge that things are happening and maybe guide employees to resources like EAPs and those kinds of things to seek help, or encourage them to talk to each other about things that are happening. Okay, we'll go to the next one. All right. So basically what we're looking at is we need to focus on the employee experience. People need to know that they have a purpose, and it's not what is their contribution to the bottom line, it's what is my contribution to the overall good of what's happening here at this organization? How am I making an impact? They need understanding. They need to know that you understand they've got other obligations, they've got priorities, and if you give to them, they'll give double back to you. They're looking for that support. They want to know that it's okay to raise their hand and say they're struggling. Can I have access to the EAP? They're looking for awareness. So all of this comes down to frontline managers and the leaders being aware and understanding of their workforce. So like over the last couple of years, we've definitely seen an increase in calls to us. This employee's been a really great employee for so long, and now they've just done this, or we're seeing a behavior change here, and this is unacceptable. Well, when we go back and we look that this is so out of character, there's something different happening. And so we're not just gonna, dismiss this person and write them up and take them through the process to try to get rid of them. We need to understand and be supportive of what they're going through. And there's 9 times out of 10, we've been able to turn those people around just because we acknowledged and understood what was happening with them. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is from Mental Health America. And this is some data about the workplace in 2021. And some of it is compared to 2018, obviously pre-pandemic. But right now, 9 in 10 employees report that their workplace stress affects their mental health. And that's pretty significant. 3 in 5 are not receiving adequate support from their supervisors. So again, that goes back to, we need to make sure that our frontline managers and supervisors have the training and the support and the tools that they need to be able to support their teams and the employees they're working with. 4 in 5 employees feel emotionally drained from their work, which of course leads to burnout. And then back in 2018, 40% of employees were looking for a new job. 2021, 56% of employees are regularly looking for a new job. And then that's contributing to the work environment. So back in 2018, 46% of employees found it difficult to concentrate because of their work environment. Now we've got 65%. And part of that could be attributed to lack of support, lack of awareness, lack of transparency and communication, lack of flexibility. I mean, there certainly are some organizations and some of our clients that they did force back to what it used to be, and they're now experiencing very high turnover. Their candidate pools are shrinking by the day. It's much more difficult to operate. Only 5% of employees strongly agreed in 2021 that their employer provides a safe environment for employees who live with mental illness. So that's pretty huge. And what we also, wasn't part of this data, but I happen to be doing another presentation today about mental health in the workplace. So I have this data in my head, but about 25% of US adults live with a diagnosed mental illness. And so if we've got, I can't remember what the billions of people that is, but that's a pretty significant number that needs to be addressed. And then this is individual financial insecurity, because of course we just came out of this pandemic, it was an emergency. So now we've got over 60% of employees don't feel prepared in case of an emergency. And 1 in 3 can't afford their healthcare costs. So pretty significant data. And so they're looking to their employers to help with some of this stuff and to be supportive, understanding, and aware. Any questions on or discussion? Feel free to throw stuff out. I like conversation. Okay, you can go to the next one. All right. So this whole remote hybrid onsite thing, I'll preface this by saying my company has always been remote for 11.5 years. We've been a remote workforce. We're small, there's 10 of us, but still, we've managed remotely. So obviously the pandemic piece wasn't all that much of a change for us. But I also so I'm a huge advocate of it. It works for us. I've seen it work for a lot of our clients. I understand that it doesn't work everywhere. It doesn't work for all industries. It doesn't work. Obviously production, hospitality, you can't, that's not an option. You have to be there. But I do think we need to look at what does make sense for your company. If you were in a position where some roles were able to go remote, and they're being brought back just because everybody else is brought back, I think it's worth reevaluating that and determining what kind of flexibilities you can put in there. So it might be based on position. So you could have, your production workers, obviously that's not an option, but maybe your accounts receivable and your HR folks and, some of the other maybe administrative managerial roles, there can be some flexibility in there. Yes.
A group, if it's, you guys have a fear of, not everybody can work from home, some employees would be better in the office and be more productive versus sometimes if they are working from home, it would be a bigger distraction. They wouldn't be as, like, how do you battle that? To do because you kind of have to blanket it, if you're gonna let one department work from home, you can't pick and choose which employees,
Within the
would like
department,
that
right?
too.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if anybody's experiencing anything like that, if you worry that production wouldn't be the same across the board with every employee.
Has anybody experienced that? It is certainly an issue, and that was one of the issues pre-pandemic as to why some employers wouldn't allow for remote, back then we called it teleworking. Back then, so long ago, they wouldn't allow for flexibility because maybe they had a poor performer and they were asking to work remotely for whatever reason, but the employer didn't entrust the person to get the job done. They're not doing it on site. What makes them think they're going to do it there? So that certainly is a component of it, but we're going to kind of get into that a little bit more here, but that's where, like, if you're structuring your business to allow for remote or hybrid, you have to shift the way that it's being managed and led, because it's not the same as it was. It's not just somebody was working on site and now they're going to go telework or remote work, whatever you want to call it. So it's completely different. Yeah.
So I was saw a presentation last week about people that had left their employer to find another job in the middle of this because of all the great shuffle or
Resignation,
whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I may not have very specifics, but the 60-ish% of the people that were surveyed were not happy with the move they made.
Right.
The 30-something people that were happy got more flexibility, not more pay.
Right.
The 60-something%,
We're
most
lured
of
by the
them
pay.
left for more pay,
Right.
and they weren't happy about that.
Right.
Where the 30-something left for more flexibilities,
Yes.
and they are all still happy. That was the kind of the high level understanding of that quick slide that was presented to us.
And that's what we're seeing. And that's what goes back to, the first slide that we were talking about with that flexibility. And that was kind of the crux of that 60 Minutes episode was, and I also get into it a little bit more in the attracting and retaining, is people are leaving industries and organizations that don't meet their current needs. And a lot of their current needs revolves around flexibility. So they're willing to make lateral moves, take pay cuts, work. Some companies are going to 32-hour work weeks instead of 40-hour work weeks. And so people are going to those organizations to meet their lifestyle needs. And then, I was talking to a small business down in Pineville last week. He had a guy that left for twice as much and he's miserable. So what ended up happening is they lured all these people like, we can give you financial security. Here's all of these things. And, they made it nice and shiny, and they have to lure people in that way with the money because it's a horrible work environment typically. But we're seeing that across the board. Obviously, compensation is significant for people. They're not going to work for free or, below their, what they need. But the lure of work-life balance is, outweighing the compensation piece in some instances.
I was going to say on the manufacturing side, a lot of our companies who can't be flexible in hybrid working are shifting models to 3 12-hour work days, or you get to choose your schedule to allow for that kind of flexibility. So they're even getting creative and not really the hybrid aspect because they can't be hybrid, but just working as much as they can with their employees.
Yeah, and that's a great point because not everybody can do some of the things we're talking about, but there are other alternatives. Like it doesn't have to be, first, second, third shift, 8 to 5, and you don't have to do that. You can give people the option. And if there are things about the work or the work environment or the industry that we know just, it happens everywhere. It's not great. You have to be transparent about it, but then maybe accommodate it by making flexible schedules and giving people the opportunity to choose their own things. I was talking to a guy that owned a bunch of Chick-fil-A franchises, and he goes, I miss the good old days when I would tell candidates, or, when I was hiring people and I would tell them what shifts they work, and now they're coming in and telling me what they can work themselves. I was like, yeah, how about that?
In the hotel industry, we're 365, 24/7, right? So pre-pandemic, weekdays were just booming, corporate travel, and the weekends were what you focused on. Now, post-pandemic, weekends are flourishing, and the weekdays are what we struggle with. But our housekeeping staff and like a lot of the staff, they were able to have those weekends, Sundays off. We didn't need as many people.
Yeah.
So now, like, their original availability is not working well for us. And I had a GM tell me last week, she was like, I mean, Hilton has like an employee benefit, right?
Yeah.
I don't care if somebody just wants to work 8 hours once a week on Sundays.
Yeah.
I'll hire them.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need. And even if the floor of an employee hotel room rate, makes them seal the deal, like, let's do it. I mean,
Yeah.
just for one day, they're willing to hire.
Yeah, and there are, there's a lot of employees because they're looking for flexibility or, we saw a large group of the workforce, the female workforce leave because of childcare and dependent care obligations, but they still want to maintain their career. So they're open to part-time or flexible, whatever. So if we can create that flexibility to be able to get those folks back in the workforce, even if it's just for a little bit, that's the way to do it. Yeah. So some of the other ways that we're looking at remote, hybrid, and on-site is, we have some clients that remote first is an option. They still have their office space. You can come in if you want, but we want you here for meetings and team gatherings because that's still important. So like for us, even though we've always been remote, we've always gotten together on a quarterly basis, except for the last 2 years. Now we're starting to get back together on a quarterly basis because that stuff is still important. The one thing to consider with remote workforce, hybrid workforce, like Nancy was saying, somebody's been living like here for a while and now they want to go move somewhere else. An organization, a company needs to know where the people are because each state has different HR laws, tax laws. There's so much compliance associated with it. And employees don't know, they don't think about that. But like we have a client that called the other day and they're like, I think one of our people is in Argentina right now. And we were like, what? But that's significant because it depends on where they go, how long they're there, and what their role is. That could put obligations back on the organization, whether it's tax implications, employment law requirements. There's so much that goes into it. So you need to know where employees are when they're working. But outside of, temporary moves and maybe workations, as people are calling it, if you have a North Carolina-based organization, and let's say you hire somebody in Georgia and that's what they work out of remotely, you have to register in Georgia, pay payroll taxes, unemployment, so there's a whole another component to that, follow employment law down in Georgia, which is different than North Carolina. And so then there's a little bit of a compliance stance there too. And so kind of like what we were mentioning before, depending on which way you go, your frontline managers, they're the ones that I talk about that a lot. They're the ones that have the most impact on employees. We've all maybe heard the saying that people join organizations and they leave managers, and they say that because it's true. And so depending on how your workforce ends up getting set up, they're the ones that are going to be responsible for managing communication is different in a remote environment versus a hybrid environment versus an on-site environment. How performance is managed different remotely, so we really need to make sure that the frontline managers get the training and the resources and support that they need. So like in a remote environment, you almost have to over communicate. I've kind of gotten used to it with my group. We over communicate, we have all kinds of Slack channels for various topics, and we have set meetings over Zoom, but we still allot time for non-work stuff. Like I intentionally, through my leadership, have to build that stuff in a remote environment, because it doesn't happen naturally like it does in an on-site environment. So if you're hybrid or remote, you really need to be intentional about your leadership and how that is, and how that works with your teams. So like I'm constantly throwing stuff out on Slack to create engagement, give the team opportunities to connect with each other without me. And, we're able to make it work. And we have a lot of clients too that are fully remote, they're all over the country. They weren't before, like they went from, a single state employer to now, 15, 20 states, fully remote, and working with their managers to provide support and being intentional with their leadership. Okay. Making sure I stay on track here. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is attracting and retaining employees. And you'll see, like I said before, a lot of this mirrors the first two slides that we talked about managing the post-pandemic work environment. When you're doing your company gut check and you're reevaluating your policies and your process, the recruiting and hiring process is the best place to start, because that's people's first glimpse into your organization and how things are done. So if you have a disruptive, unclear, drag out process through the hiring process, you're going to lose people. They're going to see that that's how it is internally, and you're not going to be able to attract and get the candidates in that you need. So we really want to look at making sure that you're establishing a clear and timely process. Timely because people have multiple offers. I can't remember the last time the recruiter on our team didn't say, I have this candidate for this client, but they have 4 other offers right now. We need to move. So it needs to be timely. And so part of that is making sure that you've got a clear process internally and with the candidates so everybody knows what to expect. And it's not uncommon for candidates to say, if we made an offer to a candidate, we had one that happened the other day. We made an offer to a candidate and she goes, well, I have 2 other offers. I'm expecting another one. Can I get back to you in a week? So what do? We wait a week, see what happens. The other thing is people are joining organizations. They're seeking out organizations more so than applying for jobs, if that makes sense. So Breezy HR is a talent acquisition platform. They just issued a report for 2021 that showed company websites was the #1 recruiting source for most organizations, and then it was Indeed and LinkedIn. Those were the top 3. And so it's really important that organizations, if they have an HR function or recruiting function or whatever, they're partnering with marketing to make sure that that career page is current, it's attractive, it's bringing in the folks that people are looking for, but also your clients, your target market, and your customers aren't the only ones checking out your social media and all that other stuff. So your marketing needs to also be attracting potential employees and candidates. You can do that through highlighting current employees and what do they like about working here, and that kind of stuff. So I strongly encourage people to partner with their marketing folks to, again, keep that company website. If you don't have a careers page up, I would do that. To keep that current, and then work on some social media strategies around attracting talent. What candidates are looking for is flexibility. Like you were saying before, people were leaving organizations that don't give them the flexibility to meet their current needs. And so if you have an organization that allows flexibility, be clear about that. Most people aren't applying for jobs if they don't have the compensation in the job posting and if it doesn't say remote, hybrid, or on-site. So you have to make sure that that's in there so that they know what they're getting into. If they're looking for flexibility, that's what they're going to look for in the job posting. North Carolina doesn't have a law around this right now, but some states have laws where you can't ask about salary history and you have to put the compensation in the job posting. And it's just going to continue to grow. And so again, whatever your organization is able to offer, be transparent about it in the job posting. And the other piece with transparency is kind of like we were talking about with manufacturing. If there's parts about the job that maybe aren't so great, we need to be transparent about that through the hiring process, because people will have unrealistic expectations and fall into the trap, like these folks that were lured by all this money and these great promises, because the company wasn't transparent about some of the challenges. Everybody has challenges. So be upfront about it, and then come up with unique situations or unique ideas as to how you can, combat that. And people are looking for culture. Along with the flexibility, they want to know that they're supported, they're acknowledged, and that they have purpose. And so that is a lot of what is going to help you attract candidates. The other thing that we need to be considerate of is expanding our candidate pool. A lot of people resigned from certain industries. A lot of people went back to school to get new skill sets, so they don't have to go back to some of the industries that they may have gotten burned out from. Consider looking at candidates from outside of your industry. They might have transferable skills. Similarly to what we were talking about before, where you might reskill internal candidates, you can look at maybe reskilling or training people from other industries that may have gone back to school or getting certificates to be able to change career courses themselves. A lot of teachers are looking to change industries. Healthcare workers, even HR folks are tapped out, So look outside the industry. And then we need to overlook our own internal biases, gaps in employment history, people who might be considered job hoppers, those kinds of things. Not everybody's great at writing a resume. So we just need to understand that, there might be things in there that we don't know. So I think it's important to kind of gut check yourself if you're a hiring manager and overlook those things, and let's not make assumptions based off people's resumes. And then there's a bunch of other things that some folks are doing. I know that a lot of manufacturing groups are looking at second chance programs to help folks that were incarcerated and that can transition back into the workplace. I talked to, a small business the other day who she's reaching out to transitional shelters and women's shelters for her job openings. So I think we just, similarly to coming up with creative ideas to accommodate different things in the workplace that might not be working for people anymore, we need to do the same thing with candidates. So I threw a lot of information at you. I want to open it up to questions and discussion, but also understand that the baseline theme here is human-centered workplaces, flexibility, and individuality. Thank you.
Questions, Deanna?
Yeah.
Have you heard of any employees leaving a particular state to go to another state to avoid income tax?
Not specifically to avoid income tax, but we have had a lot of activity around moving. Yeah. Out west, a lot of folks from the East Coast here are going to Colorado, oddly enough. There's a lot of people going to Colorado, but not specifically for income tax. But
I have a follow-up to that.
yeah.
So it's a big discussion in our industry right now, what is equitable in terms of if you have a remote opportunity in North Carolina.
Yes.
We'll give New York. If you work in New York and you move to North Carolina for cheaper living, better cost of living, better lifestyle, and two employees are making the same money, is that equitable and or how, if yes or no? So that's just a big discussion in our industry right now.
That is happening a lot, and we are seeing that with a lot of our clients because they've gone fully remote. They've expanded their candidate pools across the country, and so they've got people in 12 states. You've got it's funny. We actually have a client in DC, and they're paying DC wages to somebody in Rutherfordton. I can't ever say that, and he was like, "That guy's banking right now, right?" And it's really up to the organization and how you want to do it, because there's a handful of ways you can do your comp. You can do it regionally. You can do it based off of the organization's, home base, depending on what that is, and account for that. It's really up to the organization how you want to do it, but you have to be consistent. So if you did have somebody in New York, and let's say you did a regional grouping where, anybody in the Southeast is in this range for that role, anybody, in the Northeast, you quadrant it out, or you can do it by state and city. I mean, you can get granular. It's just whatever makes sense for your company, but it is something that has to be addressed. Yeah.
For employees, and I'm just curious if any business owners have considered this, but employees that make a high salary and that you can possibly in this market hire somebody for less salary, are we seeing those decisions being made, people who, I guess.
I'm sure they are. I have not seen that with our clients.
Yeah.
If anything, it's the opposite. People are trying to figure out how can we, yes, give them more. And it's not always necessarily increased base comp. It's bonuses, which like sign-on bonuses are horrible. So we're not seeing a lot of those, but we're seeing maybe retention bonuses or more performance-related bonuses, those kinds of things.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I appreciate the presentation. I mean, I see it more from an employee standpoint, I think, than some maybe other people in the room, but flexibility, hands down. I mean, I have a 4-year-old, the daycare closes early now because they're short-staffed. I mean,
yeah,
if I didn't have the flexibility in my company, definitely be looking, so I think that it's a true testament to what's going on out there. I mean, I feel it. Spoke to me.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Brandy.
Well, I just want to second what you said about the intentional leadership. So I was doing consulting before I joined Payroll Plus, and one of the things that I would see is, HR would get the directive, make some flexible policies, go out there, get the people, we need to keep them, and then the C-suite and those top level managers kept managing the same way they always had. So when there's an inconsistency in what you're saying, HR is telling you this, and your leadership is still requiring you to, you don't have to be in the office, but I'm here.
Yeah.
I've been here 6 a.m. and I'll be here till 7 tonight. So, influencing the way that C-suite is leading their teams will really make or break whether those policies actually work.
That's right. And there has to be consistency with practice to whatever your policies are. And that's where we run into people join organizations because they have these policies and they told us this, there's all this is happening, but my manager doesn't operate like that, so I'm leaving. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Deanna, if I heard you correctly, did you say sign-on bonuses are horrible? Is that what you said?
I'm not a fan of those because it's a very short-term, I guess, benefit. And unless you really have something tied into longevity there, they typically backfire. People forget about it very quickly. And then you've got folks who've been there, powering through for years. And they're like, what about us?
Yeah, and we've been seeing like some non-qualified deferred comp. So it's basically a 5-year bonus, right? Like we're gonna keep putting your money away for you, but if you're here 5 years, boom, it's yours.
Yeah.
So not to make things more complicated, but we've got 5 different generations in the workforce too. So something that motivates a millennial and a communication factor, or whatever, I'm younger than millennial, I forget generation Y, they're gonna want technology, they're gonna want the flexibility, they're gonna want, something different than someone who is, in their mid-50s is gonna want. They're gonna want 401k, they're gonna want to be there from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. So I think it's still, the individualization is extremely important with the hiring practices as well, and retaining those employees, because someone that's 25 is not going to want the same thing that someone that's 55 is. And you're going to have both of those different generations in the workforce right now.
So it's in the middle, I want all.
Right. But it's really complicated because you can't do the same thing. Not that you want to discriminate or offer something that's, not the same for everyone, but I think when you're hiring and retaining people, it's important to not only know what's important to them as you hire them, but also just what speaks to them.
Yeah.
Philosophy, culture,
Yeah.
all of those things are extremely important.
Yeah, there's a compensation guy that we work with in Charlotte, and one of the things that he does with some of his clients is during open enrollment, he uses that for benefits and comp, PTO, everything. So it meets the needs of individuals. So you basically have like your benefits, you have your base compensation, you've got your PTO, maybe your 401k match, let's say. So you get every year, you have this bucket of money, you get to allocate how you want to use it. I want more 401k match this year, so I'm going to take less PTO and keep my benefit premium contribution the same. So you've got this bucket to be able to flex however you want every year. Like maybe you're planning for a big vacation one year, take more PTO, and you take less towards your benefit premium. So there's different ways that you can do things, as long as everybody's given the same opportunity to make the choice that works for them, particularly when it comes to benefits. Like you can't single people out and create unintentional discriminatory practices. But if you say, here are your options, everybody has the same options, you can choose, like she was saying with the shifts. Here are your options, you choose.
Is that logistically challenging? That's what I was wondering too. I mean, does it make it, is it
It's
logistically
a
challenging?
little more administrative.
Yeah.
But if you have, again, some of the technology in place for those administrative pieces, it's, maybe just another step or whatever.
Right. So it's essentially a cafeteria plan benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I don't know why he doesn't talk about it more. I talk about it more than he does. But yeah. Any other questions? I appreciate y'all coming. Not everybody loves HR. We've never been accused of being bearers of good news. So thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. This is the program of the Chamber and the EDC, and Ryan, I know you got the 360 program that Melinda was talking about yesterday at our nonprofit roundtable. Also, manufacturers make will still come up.
Yep.
So can you talk about those two, and then also what are some of the program activities? Because Ryan spoke to our Leadership Lake Norman program on economic development and talked about what was it, the last 10 years of it's just been phenomenal for what you've brought to the organization. So can you speak to that?
I think we have the two tallest presenters in history. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Bill. And it's been interesting. I started here in 2013, which feels like yesterday. And we had 0 spec buildings in all 3 towns. And right now we're over 5 million square feet of either in place, under construction, or going through permitting. A spec building is building built without a tenant. So it's a gamble by the development community. So project activity is reflective of the space we have now. So similar to the employer market right now, there's a bidding war for some of our buildings. In fact, one building in particular in Huntersville is, per the broker, the most active building in Mecklenburg County right now. I joked with the broker, I need to set up a satellite office there so I can just be, and they've actually given me the access codes because sometimes they're just too busy in Charlotte, so I can let people in the building now. But project activity is picking back up. This is normally our busy season. Normally January to June is more active. The great news is that we're seeing international projects again. So we've had delegation from Japan. Mayor Bells was kind enough to meet with. They're coming back for another tour. We've had folks in from Dubai. We've had folks in from Germany. So that's starting to pick back up as well. So I'm really excited on that end. Elizabeth is our not new. It still seems new since June. She's our workforce development manager. So back in 18 or so, we saw and heard from our businesses that we're struggling to find employees, similar to now, and particularly in advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. So we took a step back and we started working with our school systems, working in the Lake Norman Education Collaborative, working with Bill in the Chamber, and bringing folks on site. So companies could, or excuse me, students, counselors, teachers, principals could see our manufacturing environments, could see how clean they are, how nice and safe they are and comfortable. I still remember walking out of a building in this park on like March 12th, 2020, the middle school delegation. We were making so much progress at that time. And then obviously the world changed. But the good news is we recently had an event called Journey 360, where we took delegation from Huff, North, and Hopewell to 3 of our manufacturers. And I would give this, I think you said grand slam. I mean, it was an incredible event. We actually were able to engage high school students, which is amazing. And we broke up into different groups. So I was with the Huff kids, and we all had a text stream going around, and it was, all right, just give me the comments of the students. And what were some of them? This is much cooler than I thought. I wish this could go longer. It was amazing. So our manufacturers did such a great job. They had different stations set up. They explained different roles within the industries. They showcased how fun some of these companies are, ping pong tables for employees, break rooms, all types of great things. So we're really making a lot of progress now, having a full-time person on staff. What was the increase in the Mingles? 45%?
Yeah, in our spring speed networking, we had 70 participants, and then in the fall, we had 160. So that's shown, I mean, virtual speed networking is something that we'll probably, we're considering keeping virtual because we can engage all 3 schools at once. And for industry professionals who may be traveling from Charlotte or, wherever, can just hop on a virtual link. And that's something that we have found productive out of COVID. And so that's something we're considering keeping virtual.
Absolutely. So if we'd love to have you participate. It's basically an hour of your time. You meet virtually with students, but they ask questions. How did you end up in your career? Why did you study in school? Different options and then different discussions. And it's really worked well virtually, as Elizabeth alluded to, but we are getting folks back on site now, which is really exciting. So activity is strong. We're really encouraged by what we're seeing. And we have an announcement that we thought was going to be this week, but we're waiting on the company right now. So that will be a nice win for the region. And overall, just really excited about the future. And hopefully, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer as much as I can. Tim sort of let the rabbit out of the hat with this company looking for space, but hopefully they're able to find a location nearby as well and grow their business, because we see that a lot. Companies that are coming back to work, sometimes they had folks remote and now they need some office locations for them. Ironically, the space they're looking at, it's a little eerie because they vacated in March of 2020, and as you walk down the hall, the paper calendars that we had where you signed up for space, it's still March 2020 as you walk down the hall. So it's sort of like a
time capsule.
Yeah, it's like a time capsule going back in time. But fingers crossed they're gonna be able to grow into that space. And any questions?
I definitely will help out any way
Oh,
I
that'd be
can with
great.
that. I enjoy
Awesome,
those
thank you.
things and them picking brains of different industry leaders. And then, of course, our meeting spaces are very small at the hotels, like 20 people classroom style, similar to this. But we get so many like corporate meeting requests that I can't even handle at North Lake or Huntersville. I mean, is that something I can forward on to you guys, and hopefully keep the room nights and just.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so you guys have not necessarily few business space, but just meeting space in general.
Yeah, and the good news is that we have some it's not huge, but not a convention center, but we have more space coming online soon. So.
And do you guys work with the CVB a lot?
Oh,
on that?
absolutely.
Okay, because I remember, gosh, we thought that there was going to be a big convention space coming up a little bit north of Lake Norman at one point through hotels, but that's something that we really can use.
Yeah, I was working in Concord when they built the Embassy Suites with the convention center attached, and you could see the impact there, just, the cluster of hotels that popped around there. So it is a big advantage to have that space.
There's one slated for North Lake and Embassy, but they put that on the back burner, but that's going to be pretty impactful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
This particular program was recorded, and we're going to be sending that out to the EDC will send it out to investors. We'll send it out to our larger chamber members, but also a program that we did last Friday with our Focus Friday, sponsored by Wont, was the president of working on AT&T, Trey Raven, and he spoke to the future of telecommunications, 5G, and data privacy. So likely when we send it out, we may send out both videos at the same time. We also are finally having our annual banquet that we put off. We would have had in January. We were going to have it in April 28th, so we got that coming up as well. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I got a question, Mike. You're one of our larger CEOs. Is there a topic that you would like to see us, transportation? We're doing a lot of things. The town's doing a lot of things right here on 23. Is there a topic that you think larger CEOs are concerned about outside of HR?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think transportation, I think we've been warned over the last 3 years that it's coming, but it's here. And I think I have an understanding, but a lot of people are like, why they cut the trees down? What's going to happen on the thing? But now that it's in your face, I think it would be good to have something like that. I think labor, I don't think we're getting out of this labor crisis anytime soon. So I think labor is very topical. I think the range of 15 to 25 dollar an hour jobs are essentially gone. I can talk about healthcare. I know certainly services, a lot of other service industries, that entire 15 to 25 dollar range where you come and start with 15 and you get some experience and you get some education and you move up to 25, and that's a big increase from now. You kind of just have to breathe and work it down for 22. And so what happened to that range? Maybe something about that. Okay, that's my thought.
I would echo that second, because at a law firm, we're a service industry, and we have, pay scales that start exactly what you're talking about, 15, and the folks that we used to, start at 18 or whatnot, when we're trying to hire, we can't get them, like you're saying, under 22 or 25. And we're going, yikes, how are we gonna manage this? So it would be nice to have more information on that, how other folks are dealing with it, and know that it's gonna change.
If you get pushback from your current employees.
Exactly, and that's
they're
the
hired at a
problem,
higher rate.
because they're getting hired in at a higher rate, these people have been working there for 10 years.
Right. I have people with 10 years experience working as nursing assistants, or other things. We're making $20 an hour, which is great as a nursing assistant. And they come to me and say, I can go to college. And how do you-
With a full benefit package and a bonus. How do you compete with that? Exactly.
Kids out of school in the service industry, whether it's legal or accounting, whatever, they're 75, 85, 90 expectations. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go find some of the experience and have my plan.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
that's not really what I want to do, but I feel like I have to. I don't know how to pick.
because not only are you increasing your labor costs, but your time to train them is taken off of your bottom line as well. So it's much easier to hire somebody at 120 and you still make out better. Yeah, that's what we're finding.
So labor issues and transportation infrastructure, some things that we need to consider. Well, again, thank you everybody for coming. We have still plenty of donuts. And we want to thank Petra, Tim Holder for hosting us today, and Ryan. Thank you, Elizabeth, for running the show. So thank you very much. Deanna, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.